All right, everybody. I am so excited today. I have Alyssa Carter on with us, and she is going to be talking to us about her practice and about her connection with ODO and what they are doing for our orthodontic industry. Alyssa, the way I like to start things off is to have my docs and my guests just kind of talk to us. First, I'm really interested to find out a little bit more about you and how you got to kind of your orthodontic journey. So, how you got to where you're at, and then how you got in with ODO.
Okay, I am actually practicing in my hometown in Sherman, Texas, and I was born and raised in a really small town outside of Sherman called Bells, but Sherman's where the orthodontist is, and went off to Oklahoma State and love football and tailgating from there. If you ever see my social media and know anything about me.
Yep.
And then I went to Baylor, came back to Texas for dental school and Florida for residency, and feel very blessed by each of those steps that I had the opportunity to be a part of. As far as my practice and where I am involved a little bit, what got me involved with ODO, smaller town practice, I am a little bit of a nerd at heart and what orthodontist isn't, right? And so I enjoy learning about products and what's out there and how can we make an experience better or modify a product to improve it to make the patient experience better, treatment better, the lives of our team better, et cetera. And through some of that product brainstorming, I had the opportunity to meet a guy named Jed Johns, who at the time worked for Ormco.
Yeah.
And he and I had collaborated on some thoughts over a few years. And then he is a co founder of On Demand Orthodontist and had reached out to me to let me know about his new business and adventure. And I thought it was awesome, the philosophy, and kind of just jumped on.
I love that. I love that. So, let's talk a little bit because I feel like one of the hardest things for orthodontists when I'm working with them is a lot of times to implement new systems or to bring systems into their practice or technology into their practice and get their team members on board with that and all of that. So can you talk to us a little bit about, I know you like change. I know that you can appreciate the importance of systems, but talk to us a little bit about that and how that kind of came about in your own practice.
So I love this saying, if nothing changes. And I do love change. And I think our team now is so used to, oh, Dr. Carter left to go to a meeting. I wonder what she's going to change this week. What crazy ideas does she have? The reality is that you're the license at hand and you are the sole responsibility for how well your patients are treated and therefore your community.
Yeah.
And your name's on the door. And so what happens though is we do get resistance from our
Mhm.
team.
Yeah.
And you're usually changing something to make the flow of things in your practice or the flow of patient care better. And that's usually when you're already really busy and time is an issue. And so using and finding time to make the change or to implement the change or hold accountable who can help with the change is always a struggle.
Yeah.
And I learned very early that you can't just say, hey, let's try to do this. And people just like overnight just walk out and help you make it happen. You actually have to kind of assign tasks and put the plan together. And with the little time that we usually have, it's not always a priority on the urgent and important list.
Yeah.
So, one thing that I've tried to become better at is actually finding who does things better than me in our practice in certain
Mhm.
areas and who can make help make this implementation happen and ask them to do things and then put a follow-up note. Did that get done by a certain day? And there's also systems out there like Slack or Monday or
Yeah.
Asana that can help with some of that streamlining. But your name's on the door. And sometimes when I lecture, I show the meme that's change is coming and it's this girl running away or run, Forest, run. And I think that's how we feel is what's going to happen is
Yeah.
people, because it has happened. Assistants will be like, well, if they do that, I'm out. And I think that's just a early signal that that person probably doesn't belong with you anyway.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I think to just reiterate what you're saying to our audience out there is you are the practice owners. And so many times it can be really, I think, easy to fall into the category where your team is running the practice instead of you running the practice and making those decisions. And not that we want to just kind of willy nilly change and not think about the impact that it's having, but I do really believe, like I think you're saying as well, that if you feel it's going to be good for you and good for your patients and good for your practice, you need to pursue it without worrying about what the team is going to say. And now again, have a process and a rhyme and a reason to how you guys are going to go about implementing the new system. But I love that you say that too. Sometimes it really helps you maybe when we don't have the right team members on board or in place in our practice for that. So let's talk a little bit about on-demand orthodontist and what is that and what does that mean to you and your practice and how do you guys utilize that within your system, within your office, and then systems that you think are really good for doctors if they're thinking about using ODO to put in place.
On-demand orthodontist was appealing to me because many of the systems from one of the co-owners, Dr. John Warford, is very parallel to the way that we were building our practice and kind of the future of how we envisioned our practice. And as a part of that, I said, hey, I would love to be on the clinical advisory, make sure the standard of care stays where it should be, and help develop these systems because we had already tried a lot of these systems in our practice as we developed some systems to see our patients the way we see them now, which we'll get into in a minute.
Yeah.
And we had failed at a lot of them. We had learned some of the verbiage we needed to change to make sure our patients knew why we were going to practice this way. We had to redo things. And when you're the one failing to get involved in your practice, it takes a little longer
Sure.
to get upstream. And so if you've already done that, you can kind of predict some of those hurdles that may come across and help others progress faster. And so one thing I've heard Jeff Kozlowski say before is fail fast. And I love that. It's your team will always say, well, what if it doesn't work? Or they'll try to, some people, not all, even doctors will say, what about this? And it's like the 0.2% of circumstances that might ever happen. And instead of thinking that way, I'm like, okay, let's pretend it works in 98% of people. And then as those circumstances come, we'll figure it out. Like we can change what we're changing. If it doesn't work, we kick it out. And if it's working but not completely, we get together and we say, how do we make it work better? And so that's where on-demand orthodontist came in. And on-demand orthodontist is truly like a virtual orthodontist in your practice, like having an orthodontic associate. And what it is anything from getting the records and having another orthodontist help diagnose, treatment plan if you want, help do a setup. That's an orthodontist that is really advanced in aligner therapy. So they understand staging and protocols and what may work with plastic and what may not. And then take that and even go as far as all of the headaches associated with aligner patients in your practice, as far as not tracking a debonded attachment, doesn't need to be replaced, staging of the IPR, adding attachments, et cetera, get overseen by a virtual orthodontic assistant. And then the virtual orthodontist makes decisions and connects with your team to say, hey, these are things that are going to happen. All the headaches go away. And when a patient shows up in your office, the only thing that needs to be done is put the attachment back on or do the IPR. And you don't have to worry about if it wasn't tracking why. We've already looked into, was it the setup? Was it not wearing it? Was it because the attachment came off? And that has helped a lot of orthodontists enjoy aligners, and anybody enjoy aligners more, including the team, and eliminate unnecessary appointments because we stage things in the setups a certain way where IPR will be combined with a refinement or at the beginning, if possible, or we will put alerts in for different sections that we can go more into detail if we want.
Yeah, that's great. And what I'm taking away from this is I think for all orthodontists, there's always this component of time, right? You can only be in one place at one time doing one thing. And, what I see ODO doing for orthodontists out there is really allowing you to kind of be in two places at once. You've got the security of knowing that whether you're new at a system and doing something that you're wading into the water, but not 100% sure exactly where you're going or how you're doing, you've got that expertise, maybe looking over your shoulder and helping you along the way. But also, you can be in doing a new patient exam and know that somebody else is helping you bust through those cases that you need to be doing the setups for, or this or that or the other. Or I would think you're coming to the weekend and going, oh gosh, do I spend 4 hours in my home office working on my cases, or do I go to my kid's soccer game or go do this or that? Am I kind of correct in that?
You are completely on point. It's when an orthodontist usually begins to feel overwhelmed or hires an associate or considers it in their practice, they're usually looking at like helping because they need more time, or
Mhm.
they want to continue to grow at the same rate. So they need two humans and they just are already at their capacity Monday through Friday and can't add anyone. The other one is to regain time. Like I need some of my time back, so I'm going to hire someone to fulfill that time. And this kind of helps with that. It helps with the time, it helps with the treatment planning, it helps with a lot of those systems. And in addition to that, there's 137 parameters that will be customized for every patient that goes through aligners and should be.
Yeah.
And to do those things chair side or to do that for every patient in your practice sometimes is time consuming. And that is one thing that we will monitor and customize for every patient is 137 parameters. And then on top of that, we will put in custom alerts to check certain time points, as simple as how many times or how many weeks apart do we want to check rubber bands and make sure that they're actually being compliant before you 15 weeks out the door and come back and they didn't wear the rubber bands. We'll check it along the way. We'll give them feedback, we'll give them advice, hygiene starting at week 1. If the patient may need a refinement, why wait until the very end of the trace to do the refinement when you create space to move teeth and then you close them all together when you're almost to that end result? Check them when all that before you close it together, because
Yeah.
then you're not reopening it at the refinement. And all those checkpoints are going to be customized, and we're going to be checking those. Hey, that we didn't get 100% what we want. We're going to do the refinement at tray 20 instead of tray 32 when they finish. Different things it's a lot to think about and implement into a practice and train your team to do. And this makes it where the team doesn't have to be trained.
Yeah, that's great. So, because I don't know this part of ODO, if a doctor comes on, do they have like a coach or a mentor that's assigned to them that kind of learns what they're doing and how they're doing it, or vice versa, they learn from this coach or mentor? Or how does that work if you're able to speak to that?
Absolutely. So if an orthodontist on boards with ODO, you will have a doctor that oversees all of your cases. And right now that is Dr. John Warford, Dr. Mike DePascal, or myself. And every single one of those cases, someone will work with you to help your team understand. Now, the first few that we do, someone is allowed from your office, the doctor, an employee, to sit in on that and ask questions and kind of understand what we're doing so it makes more sense in their practice. In addition to that, practice will get fully onboarded and training with all of the systems and implementations that are required to make the workflow happen. So from the time the new patient sits in the chair for records to the time the case is completely finished, that is all included and you get trained on that.
Oh, that's great. What an asset. Now, does this also work with different aligner systems out there, or is it specific to one or another?
I am a KOL for Spark.
Mhm.
So just so that's out there.
Yep.
So my preference is Spark aligners, and some other doctors prefer that too. ODO is not an aligner company. We can work with any aligner company to get the result that is desired.
Yeah, that's
So
great. That's awesome. I mean, just what a concept. And again, I just love the idea of, I think because I work with a lot of startups, and one of the things we're looking at is kind of twofold is I have a lot of docs that want to implement right from the beginning. I always say, if you're going to do a startup practice, there's never a better time to implement systems than when you're slow. And
I couldn't
although,
agree more to that. I tell everybody that.
yeah,
Do it now while you have time.
yeah, yeah. And it's kind of nice because not only do you get to learn from the system, but you've got time to learn. You've got time to really implement and put things in place. And it sounds and seems a little counterintuitive because it's like, well, Jill, I don't have a lot of money, or I don't want to do this or that. I say, do it while you're slow, because it's hard. And it's probably the biggest reason why a lot of doctors who are in busier, bigger practices won't implement new systems, is because it's hard. It's hard to do that when you're really busy. So let's talk a little bit about just kind of your passion for this. I mean, to think that you've taken on not only your practice, but you're helping all of these other doctors out there. Talk to me a little bit about how, I know how you got to it. You just told us that, but why this, and how did you come to this and have such a passion for helping other docs out there?
I think a lot of that started with our practice was fortunate to grow, and it outpaced the manpower that we had. And I'll never forget, there was a day I was in my practice and I felt some patients waited longer than they should have due to taking care of another patient longer than we had planned for, and just realizing that half of the patients that were walking through the door needed something that we didn't plan for. And then that caused the schedule to get backed up. And then you have a patient waiting. And I remember thinking, I don't even have time to go to the eye doctor one time a year. Like sometimes I bump my eye doctor appointment a couple months because I'm trying to find an hour of my day that I can get there. And I thought to myself, we expect our patients' parents, and according to Gage, on average, 18 times to come to our practice in a 2-year period or 27-month period. And then I found out that the average patient takes around 3 hours of their day, the parent, to get a patient to an orthodontic appointment.
Yes.
And I've started feeling guilty. And I said, there has to be a way, number one, to know exactly what the patient is walking through our door for, so we don't get behind. Number two, to build back up the team and then ultimately take better care of patients. So as soon as I started feeling that our patients weren't being cared for or respecting their time, started affecting me. And I just went on a search and tried to start developing more systems and solutions. And then that's exactly what ODO does. So the average visits for an ODO patient is 4 to 6. And you talk to a parent that is, oh, wow, I don't have to
I
come as much.
love, yeah, that's so great. And I think that's where the future of our industry is going, right? Being as absolutely efficient with not only the doctor's time, but chair time and the patient's time. Really being mindful of, like you said, I mean, I think really when you think about it, what it takes for a parent to go to the school, to get the kid out of school, or to take off for work, or to drive across town and to be like, oh, great, we changed your colors, everything looks good.
Think about the times that your assistants or your team members or your TC needs off for something. To take their child to their annual appointment or to take their kid to their annual eye doctor appointment. And it affects us in the practice as well. And if one of my employees asked 27 months, 18 times to take their kid to an appointment for one type of doctor appointment, that would cause a significant issue in our practice. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's what they need to take care of their child. But when you start thinking about it, how that would affect you and your employees, and then they're not getting paid for those hours, or they're having to use their PTO on an appointment. And you think about all the professions out there.
Yeah.
Teachers get 5 days off a year, which is absurd to me. Maybe they get more now, but if they take a kid to an appointment, they probably lose half a day. And time is so valuable and you can't ever get it back. And so make the most of it and respect other people's time.
Yeah, that's great. So when you decided to get involved with ODO and really started implementing the systems in your practice, can you kind of talk us through what that workflow looked like? Maybe both. When, when you're implementing, what does that look like? Once you get going as a doctor, do you have assigned team members that help with it? Is it all on the doctor's shoulders? Can you kind of talk through that a bit with us?
I sure can. So I would say 95% of the work is on the team's shoulders. And there's usually one person in the office that kind of becomes a designated person. In orthodontic practice, we're blessed because we usually have treatment coordinator and receptionist, and sometimes also a financial coordinator, insurance coordinator, and maybe office manager, however many administrative people. And so usually one of those or someone that used to be an assistant will kind of become the point of contact to make sure everything flows to ODO from the practice and back and becomes the main point of communication. Once the patient's in the chair and the notes already in the system, the assistant can almost always do all the work other than IPR.
Wow.
So there's very little delegation on the doctor's behalf. We do require doctors to get on once we believe the setup is at a really good point, staging wise, tooth position wise, etc., and approve and tell us that they approve the setup or if they need any changes, and then we'll make those and submit.
That's great. That's great. And then are they using the treatment plans? Are they brought down into their own systems, or is there a platform that they're going on to and working off of?
We have an entire HIPAA compliant platform through Monday.com that is allowing for communication, record uploads. It's so powerful and incredible. I'm going to try to get most systems in our private practice put through that outside of clinical work, but it is HIPAA compliant, and then it allows for seamless moving of all the pieces. You constantly know who's in charge of that task at that moment, where it is in the process, et cetera, et cetera. And even if you have a question, you're like, I'm going to upload some records. They haven't started treatment, but I kind of want to get back to them. Can you help me out with this and let me know? And we'll create the diagnosis and treatment plan in our eyes to help the doctor kind of relay that or understand if they're okay with doing this case that way.
Yeah, that's great. This is kind of just a random question that kind of popped into my mind as, again, I work with a lot of startups and we have lots of discussions about scanners and files and what do I do with them? And if I'm using Invisalign versus Spark versus ULab versus blah, 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 all of the different ones out there. Does it matter to you guys what scanner they're using, what file, any of that? Are you compatible with all of that?
We are compatible with every scanner.
Great.
As long as the aligner company that the orthodontist is using accepts that scan. Obviously, if you are Invisalign, you have to have an iTero, but anything else, most of our doctors use outside of that.
Yeah, great. That's wonderful. So when you look into the future and you're like, here's what's coming at us and out there, what's exciting you right now about our future in orthodontics?
I wouldn't say overly positive. I'm just very positive about the future. I think the best way to put it is that you will have to change, and you won't have to change rapidly for forever. That is what technology is bringing to the table. I mean, a phone that you bought a year ago is literally partially irrelevant if you were not to be able to do an upgrade on it. It would be irrelevant in some ways a year later. And
Yeah.
our practices are that way. And that is going to come with increased overhead and increased expenses. So there's a few factors that will become more important than ever. Number one, you have to be willing to adapt to change, and you're going to have to put in the work to do it. And I don't think there's any more like 8 to 5, 3, 4 days a week, and not having any outside work or trainings or CE. I think you can build that into your days if you want by being more efficient. I think we have to eliminate all the waste, all those appointments where patients are coming in and something's not according to plan and they have to stay in a wire longer, which causes an extra appointment, or we had poor bonding technique. And so you will have to become a little more fine-tuned on the protocols that are already in your practice. Better clinician yourself, a bracket placer, better at mechanics, better at treatment planning, diagnosing, whatever you're not good at, because you have to eliminate waste to increase profitability. And then lastly, I think as an industry, our prices will have to go up more and more over time. And I know some people think it's not going to be able to happen. But you look at any other cosmetic procedure that actually is told, oh, this may only last 5 years, or a rhinoplasty or whatever it is. And they make you aware that it will have to be redone, and you're willing to pay twice as much as you pay your orthodontist for a smile for a lifetime. And then also trying to develop some recurring revenue streams will become important. I know a lot of people that pay a lot of money for Botox every few months,
Yep.
and they're not missing it.
Yep.
And so for someone to think that to correct someone's smile, which is probably the biggest confidence booster anyone can have, that there's this lower value attached to it, just means that you don't see the value in yourself, or you need to step up in the value that you're providing your patients.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I cannot agree with you more on that. And I think I hope our audience hears that. I mean, we have to believe in what you're doing and the service you're providing, because it is. I mean, I love that. One of the biggest confidence boosters we can do is provide somebody with a great smile. And I think that's what it's all about. So I was, as you were saying that, I was also thinking about just as we go through, do you also work with dentists? Would you, if there was a dentist listening who's, hey, I think this could be really helpful for me too. Is this something that you guys provide, or is it just for orthodontists out there?
So ODO has a few different aspects. Yes, they do provide services to dentists. They provide a la carte or package services to orthodontists because the needs of both are different.
Yeah.
And then there's a little third aspect that we've been very fortunate with is some orthodontists reaching out to us to actually be an on-demand orthodontist behind
Oh,
the scenes. Woman orthodontist will stay home with her kids more, or
yep.
have a little more flexibility in their schedule and work from anywhere in the world. That being said, the dental side is catered to collaboration of making sure the patients that are being seen by dentists are treated by an orthodontist. And that is not to say that dentists are not amazing. We all went to dental school together. We're all colleagues, and I have an immense amount of respect for general dentists. I think there are dentists that will do ortho no matter what, partially because they've had a rep come in and say, if you start 10 cases, that's a certain amount of revenue that you otherwise wouldn't have. What a dentist isn't trained to do that an orthodontist is usually trained to do is evaluate what their chair time is worth. And
Yes.
the reason that we have to see 4, 7, 8 patients at once is because the value of every patient in our chair makes a lot less profit than a crown or a veneer.
Yes.
So yes, that might be some extra profit for that dentist, but if you are already busy and your chair is full with something else, it's not a profitable perfect procedure for you. Because I know how much it is for some of the top orthodontists in the country, and I know that they're not doing it at that same efficiency. Our practices are built for that. And I like to say it's the same if you ask me to go cut 4 veneers on a patient in my orthodontic practice. Like, it's not my biggest thing, share of chair. I don't do it.
Yep.
I could do it. It wouldn't be the best quality compared to the person that does it down the road. It would cause me a lot of headaches that I don't want. And half the time I wouldn't, like, I'd probably forget something or not understand why something isn't working right. And you take out some of those distractions and then allow it to be there. So if a dentist is going to do aligners in their practice, I highly encourage them to reach out to on-demand orthodontists because they will instantly increase their profitability per visit for those patients.
Got it. That's great. So as we leave and kind of finish up the podcast here, if you were to give 3 takeaways about ODO or about the system that you think docs need to really hear if they're considering this, because I'll bet you've piqued a lot of interest. And again, just the thought of leveraging your time, leveraging that mythical, you can't be in two places at once. Maybe we can. Give us 3 little takeaways that you think docs would want to know.
I believe this is the future. You asked what I was most excited about for the future. And for me, it's a challenge that I give myself to try to make a result better in less time. And then another takeaway is if you have a general dentist in your area doing ortho, I would highly encourage you to be a mentor to them more than someone that just talks about the fact that they're doing ortho. Because at least in my instance, anytime a general dentist has reached out to me to ask me about a case, I have sat and helped them. And almost always they've realized that they may not understand or see things through the same glass I do. And I don't demean them for that. I
That's
try
great.
to guide them through that. But I think it's an educational platform to have a chance to meet with them and show them, you know what, there are some things that they can do. There's some things that they think that they can do or don't see the compensations built in and may get them in trouble. And they need to know that you're there for them to bail them out when that happens. Obviously, with you starting the case, but I think we need to be better at collaborating both
Mhm.
ways.
I think that's great.
That's what will serve our patients better. And ultimately, it will probably end up in more patients needing or being recommended for orthodontic treatment from our dentist because they're being made aware of how we see things when patients walk into our practice. Number three, if you are not using any type of remote care or virtual care system in your practice with braces or aligners, I highly encourage you to look into that and then learn from colleagues or seminars like this, like ODO, and resources at your fingertips to learn how to implement these things into your practice and provide extra value to your patients because every online ticket I've ever bought for an Oklahoma State football game has a convenience fee if I want my tickets digitally. And I pay it every time without question because I'm not going to walk to a box or try to check my mail and make sure I got the tickets
Yes.
and remember to take them to Oklahoma with me.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. I love that analogy, and that's so exactly right. And I think as consumers, we are used to paying some of these fees, and I think we should not be afraid to pass them on to help patients have a better patient experience as they're making their way through treatment. Well, that was great. Those were some wonderful takeaways. So if somebody wants to find out more about ODO, how would you suggest they reach out to find out more?
So we have a website, ondemandorthodontist.com. We also can be emailed at my email is Alyssa at ondemandorthodontist.com. And feel free to just
That's
reach
great.
out and I'll connect you with someone who can explain the processes behind the scenes in more detail and go over everything with you.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure in this next year, you guys will be at a lot of the conferences out there. So people can come up and talk to you as well. So that's great. Alyssa, as we finish up, thank you so much. This was great information. Again, I love the concept. I love knowing that there is help out there for docs that want it and teams that want it. And I think it just, again, helps us refine and define what we're doing within our orthodontic offices. And I think allows us to work smarter instead of harder. And why not maybe even lean on somebody else's expertise until if and when we get there, or we're like, heck, why do I need to even put my brain there? I can put my brain on something else now because I know I'm being taken care of. Thank you. Thank you for sharing about ODO.
Thank
Um,
you. I love that you just said, where can I put my brain? There's only so much energy you have every day. And I am a huge advocate of outsourcing and outsourcing things
yes.
that I don't feel that I can train enough and adequately enough. And so we do outsource a
Yeah.
lot of our systems that used to create headaches in our practice that we later found out we weren't doing as well as we thought we were doing. And this is just another one of those things. You can
Mhm.
outsource some of these systems that create headaches and try to make your practice feel a little better. And just like OrthoFi or some other systems that we use
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, yep, that's great. As I like to finish up Hey Docs, one of my favorite things to do with my guests is to do something called a speed round. Are you interested in taking the speed round challenge?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. All right, coffee or tea?
Both.
Oh, love it. All right. Do you have a favorite book?
Ooh, the Go Giver.
Oh, that's a good one. Any favorite outdoor activity?
Tailgating. Running.
You got to run to tailgate, right? How about if you could be remembered for one thing? What would that be?
Being kind.
Wonderful. And then the best piece of advice you've ever had?
Kill them with kindness.
Oh, that's a good one. That's great. All right, Alyssa, thank you so much for being on Hey Docs and for giving us such good information about ODO. And thank you again.
Thank you, Jill. I enjoyed this and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you.